Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Janavalabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari. Nandana Raja Jayananda. Yashoda Nandana Raja Jayananda. Natila Vanacha Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Janavalabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari. Nandana Raja Jayananda. Yashoda Nandana Raja Jayananda. Natila Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Set it up there just now.
He who brought the treasure of divine love, and who is filled with compassion and mercy, where has such a personality as Srinivasa Acharya gone? Where are my Swarup Damodar and Rupa Goswami? Where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the saviour of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatta and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishnadas Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottam Das simply weeps. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our humble attempt today to glorify, to commemorate the disappearance of Sriman Jayananda Prabhu. According to the Vaishnav calendar, this year, May 5th is the Disappearance Day festival. But since here in South Africa, May 1st is a public holiday, according to the regular calendar, it's also the passing away of Jayananda Prabhu, May 1st. Thus far, on this platform, the Arya devotees have requested that we start some glorification today on Jayananda Prabhu's wonderful life. So far on this platform, you've heard many illustrious speakers illuminate us on various aspects of Ratha Yatra. So today we'll focus on the life and legacy and lessons of Jayananda Prabhu, who's very dear to Lord Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, actually the devotional service of the chapter dedicated to devotional service is actually an amazing there's an amazing verse that pardon me, there's an amazing verse, Shantasya Satatam Yogi Yayatma Drida Nischaya Maya Pita Manobudir Yomad Bhakta Same Priya. Therein Krishna explains that one who is not envious but who is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor, who is free from false ego and equal both in happiness and distress, who is always satisfied and engaged in devotional service with determination, and whose mind and intelligence are in agreement with me, he is very dear to me. Thus we can understand that Jayananda Prabhu was very dear to Lord Krishna by his life and activities. As always, our presentation is inspired by the teachings of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and who introduced us to the worship of Lord Jagannath amidst many other glorious things. In his childhood, Prabhupada, you may have heard, organized a mini Ratha Yatra festival. Thereby he engaged all of his neighborhood in making various arrangements for Lord Jagannath's pleasure. His festival also included a chariot. Many years later, Srila Prabhupada had the first Ratha Yatra on July 9th, 1967 in San Francisco. And Prabhupada introduced Lord Jagannath as he is in the original format of the ancient and glorious festival of chariots held in Puri. Before that, no one had even dared to think that it was possible, but Prabhupada dared, and he was triumphant. So here you see that Jayananda Prabhu was born on April 27, 1939, and 38 years later, on May 1st, 1977, he passed on from this world. This plaque is actually on a memorial for him in Mayapur Jagannath Mandir. He is known as the first saint in ISKCON, the organizer of the first ISKCON Ratha Yatra festival. Srila Prabhupada ordered that his picture has to be placed on all Ratha Yatras, and he said that Jayananda Prabhu has gone back home, back to Godhead. So Jayananda Prabhu, he was one of Srila Prabhupada's very early disciples. He took part in every San Francisco Ratha Yatra since the first one back in 1967, and an unusually active part at that. In fact, his expert engineering of the huge chariots used in the San Francisco festival had earned him a nickname amidst the devotees as Mr. Ratha Yatra. For each of the first 4 Ratha Yatras thereafter, Jayananda Prabhu actually built the chariots from ground up, that means from scratch. And although in the last few festivals before he passed away, the same vehicles were used each year, still he continued to improve them. So Jayananda Prabhu was born as Jim Kaur in Dayton, Ohio. He graduated from the Ohio State University in 1962 with a degree in industrial engineering. Yet, he ended up as a cab driver in San Francisco, and when Karandara Prabhu once asked him why he didn't get a better paying job, he said he didn't fit in with the upper class crowd. Meeting his spiritual master Srila Prabhupada. Jayananda Prabhu was interviewed the year he passed on by the Back to Godhead magazine, and they asked him, how did you first get involved in Krishna consciousness? To which Jayananda Prabhu replied, I heard Srila Prabhupada speaking in San Francisco, and somehow I knew he didn't want to cheat me. So I just wanted to work for him. And for the next 10 years, Jayananda Prabhu continued to serve Srila Prabhupada and his followers in an extremely dedicated manner. Though Jim, as he was known in those days, was not a religious person, he saw an article in the San Francisco newspaper advertising Srila Prabhupada's preaching, and it sort of ignited a ray of hope in him. At the time, Jayananda Prabhu was really depressed about life. So he resolved to check out the Indian Swami. It was like a ray of hope for him. In the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter, Krishna says, 4 kinds of people surrendered to him: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, one searching for knowledge of the absolute truth. Jim, as he was known, was searching for answers from material miseries in such a mood, and he took his first step towards his destiny. Though he would live for just like 10 years, in a short time he would witness the culmination of what would take lifetimes of spiritual effort. He would depart the world, leaving behind many valuable lessons for you and I, inspire and instruct present and future generations of Vaishnavas or devotees of the Lord in such an amazing manner. So after reading the article in the San Francisco newspaper, Jayananda Prabhu, or Jim, arrived at the temple, and he found it was mostly filled with hippies. He had short hair, clean-cut looks, and well-pressed clothes, and he stood out. He was 28, older than most of the people there. But all of his misgivings disappeared when he saw Srila Prabhupada enter. He sat through the lecture, and that day he bought the 3-volume set of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which Srila Prabhupada autographed with the inscription, "To Shriman Jim Kaur." For the first time in many years of suffering depression, Jim felt peaceful. He had just received the audience of Srila Prabhupada, his eternal spiritual master. And as you can see in this picture, he's with short hair and he's sitting in the lecture and hearing Srila Prabhupada very attentively. He started actually frequenting the temple regularly. He liked coming to the morning program when most of the hippies were still sleeping. Sometimes he'd be like the only person in the class. In February of 1967, the same year, Srila Prabhupada accepted him as his disciple and initiated him, giving him the name Jayananda Das. So Jayananda Prabhu recalls that Srila Prabhupada would cook prasadam and serve him. He didn't say anything, he just kept feeding me, and I kept eating, he says. He took to Krishna consciousness quite naturally and effortlessly, relished all aspects of Krishna consciousness, chanting on his beads, singing kirtan, eating prasad, performing sometimes deity worship, and so on. He would often remark that Krishna consciousness is so sweet. In fact, Jayananda Prabhu found Krishna consciousness so sweet that soon he lost taste for everything else. He gave his life savings to Srila Prabhupada, and in the preface to the Nectar of Devotion you may have read, Prabhupada actually publicly thanks him, saying, "I beg to acknowledge with thanks the contribution made by my beloved disciple, Sriman Jayananda Brahmachari." So, excuse me, a devotee is known as Paradukadukhi. It is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam that this is a characteristic of a Vaishnav, Paradukadukhi. A Vaishnav is always unhappy to see the conditioned souls unhappy. Otherwise, he would have no business teaching them how to become happy. In materialistic life, people must certainly engage in activities of animosity. Materialistic life is therefore compared to samsara davanala, a burning forest fire. So, this quality of compassion, paradukadukhi, is very clearly explained in or understood or grasped about Jayananda Prabhu when we hear of his sister. Her name is Gaynell Kaur. So she recalls that long before he became a devotee, they went on a family holiday on a beach in California. And she says that Jim spent hours on the beach picking ticks and fleas off the homeless dog that he found because he simply couldn't stand watching it suffer. So Jayananda Prabhu touched the hearts of so many. And they actually responded by doing devotional service for Krishna. He would get almost everything for the temple free, or with a very steep discount. He was friends with shopkeepers, city officials, drunks, derelicts. Everybody loved Jayananda Prabhu, and he happily engaged everyone in the service of Krishna. He worked the hardest, but he praised the service of everyone else. He was humble, tolerant, compassionate, renounced. You can see that his actions, his words, his life, and his death all exemplified this process of bhakti or devotional service that Srila Prabhupada has so mercifully brought to the West and to our doorsteps. So the first Ratha Yatra, the Bhakti Guided magazine in the interview with him asked, what were the first Ratha Yatras like? And Jayananda Prabhu explained that the first year, 1967, we just rented a flatbed truck and started out in Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. We decorated the truck with flowers and put the deities on the back, and the girls passed out fruit. if you see the picture of that, you'll see the deities are placed in a very unusual position, all of their backs facing each other's back. A good crowd walked along with us at the beginning, and when we turned off Haight-Ashbury, a smaller group of maybe 50 people came with us, and we went all the way to the beach. The second year, we made our own cart with saffron silk canopies, small ones, and we had the parade through Golden Gate Park to the beach. By the time the San Francisco temple had grown a little, we had maybe 30 devotees, and about 100 people came with us through the park. The chanting was very nice that year. So first festival, 50. The second festival, about 100 people. Thereafter, in 1969, they built a much bigger cart. In 1970, in 1969, they built a much bigger cart with that silk canopy like the ones they built in Jagannath Puri in India. But in 1970, they worked for 2 months straight, and they built 3 big carts, basically like the same ones we see being used all over ISKCON these days. Also, they had lots of publicity on TV, billboards, posters, and Srila Prabhupada went to that Ratha Yatra. A lot of people came, like Jayananda Prabhu says, maybe like 12,000 people. It was big. Now, can you imagine, from 100 people in the last Ratha Yatra, 12,000 people by the sincere efforts of him and his team preaching. It was big. It was a tremendous success. They had a few mishaps. One cart broke down in the middle of the parade. It was a bitter cold weather. But even though it was so cold at the beach, thousands of people stayed there, and they ate lots of prasadam. The devotees brought, Jayananda Prabhu had arranged 25 gallon barrels of prasadam, and all of it was distributed, all of it was eaten. So this was an incredible era of ISKCON that Jayananda Prabhu by his efforts had begun. So also, for the benefit of, when he was asked about what Ratha Yatra means to him, Jayananda Prabhu said, also for the devotees, it's very beneficial. Maybe before me, Ratha Yatra, maybe more for me. Ratha Yatra is a service that's given me so much of my realizations, the flowering of whatever Krishna consciousness I have. It's not a long-term occupation. It happens all at once, like a big explosion in the summer. It brings together so many devotees all working under the spiritual master with one plan, and all the transcendental paraphernalia is there. The deities, the prasadam, the chanting, the booths, the theatre. It's such a surcharged atmosphere. You never forget it. For a devotee to be able to participate in Ratha Yatra is very good for his Krishna consciousness. When you have these festivals, it gives you big, powerful event to look forward to work towards. It helps your devotion. So that is what Ratha Yatra actually meant for Jayananda Prabhu, and I'm sure for many of us too. So one day, before the Ratha Yatra parade, there was a strong wind, and there was this grating noise of metal, big grounding sound of metal. A beam snapped. The dome was broken. And the devotees, they like sort of freaked out. They were crying in despair. Some of the leaders were saying, call the whole thing off. There'll be no parade. They would have to now go to Prabhupada and tell him the bad news. But even though some of the devotees perceived these kind of troubles as insurmountable, and they would give up and say it's impossible. Impossible wasn't a word in Jayananda Prabhu's dictionary. So he stayed up, he fixed it, and the next day there was Ratha Yatra as scheduled, and Prabhupada attended that Ratha Yatra. Vishak Prabhu explains that regarding Jayananda Prabhu being dear to both the gentle and the ruffians, Vishak Prabhu, another disciple of Srila Prabhupada, he was explaining as a contemporary of Jayananda Prabhu. He said, just like the 6 Goswamis, that Jayananda Prabhu, he was so dear to both to the gentle and the ruffians. He was much at home with the Indians at the Italians at the fresh produce market when he was on the Boga run, as he was with the brahmacharis at the temple. Once a devotee was approached by a staggering drunk person in San Francisco who looked at his robes, then he looked at his face, then he said to him, "Where's my old friend Jayananda?" So even the drunk person, he became attached to Jayananda Prabhu because of his gentleness, his kindness and his compassion towards them. Many devotees who had taken over Jayananda Prabhu's service or his old territory would meet the people who would say things like, "Where's Johnny Ananda, that man? He's the nicest and most pure man I've met." Or, "I don't know much about your philosophy. But if Jayananda is into it, it must be all right." Actually, the one time they had to get something like, I think, 11 permits to have the Ratha Yatra. And Jayananda Prabhu, the devotees were liaising with one woman, public official in the San Francisco board. She was famous for giving a hard time to the devotees during the Ratha Yatra when they went to obtain these permits. So one year after the passing on of Jayananda Prabhu, when the devotees approached her, she asked, "Where's Jayananda?" On hearing that he had passed away, she broke down into tears and she had to leave the room for a little while. The purity in Jayananda Prabhu's heart would touch even the most cynical. In the Bhagavad Gita 5:7, Krishna says that one who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So Jayananda Prabhu, he was actually what is known as Daksha, expert. It's one of the 26 qualities of a devotee. And Jayananda Prabhu, he was the embodiment of these 26 qualities. He had contagious enthusiasm. It is said that although Krishna has nothing to do with non-devotees, his devotees are even more compassionate than him, and they will try to engage the non-devotees in the Lord's service. Jayananda Prabhu, he was so eager to see everyone engaged in Krishna's service that whenever a new bhakta would come, Jayananda Prabhu would make him feel as if he was engaged in the most important of works. He was older, he was bigger, he was stronger than about anybody else in the temple, and everyone was simply glad to be working under him. His Holiness Jaipataka Maharaj, when he first came to the temple, he saw Jayananda Prabhu busy on the working on the chariot, and Jayananda Prabhu looked at him and called him over, and he asked him, "Can you hold a nail for me? Can you hold a nail straight?" And Jaipataka Maharaj, who was then a new person to the movement, he said, "Sure, he can." So, so Jayananda Prabhu had him hold a nail, big nail, and Jayananda Prabhu picked up a hammer and he started to hammer the nail in, and at a certain time, sure enough, Jaipataka Maharaj removed his hand just in time, and Jayananda Prabhu said to Jaipataka Maharaj, "Wow, you really did so well. Do you think you can hold a hammer and the nail and do as I did?" And Jaipataka Maharaj said, "Sure." And then when he did that, Jayananda Prabhu left him, gave him instructions of what to nail, and it was incredible. Jaipataka Maharaj, he recalls it as one of the initial things that drew him to the Hare Krishna movement: the kindness of Jayananda Prabhu, the enthusiasm, and his ability to see the spark in him and fan that. Another devotee, Jai Hari, he heard a lot of the devotees from the other temples had heard that in San Francisco there's a pure devotee. His name is Jayananda. So everybody was very eager to meet Jayananda Prabhu. So there's one devotee, Jai Hari, he heard about Jayananda and he was also very eager to meet him. Now he thought that he would come and he would see this devotee dressed in neat saffron robes, clean shaven with a perfect sika, chanting japa like the whole day, completely detached from the material world. And he came and he was very eager to meet Jayananda Prabhu, so he was chanting his own japa, Jai Hari Prabhu, and then he heard a voice from under the car asking him, Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you pass me that wrench? So he did, and he picked up the wrench, he gave it to this person, and the person said, what's your name, Prabhu? Said Jai Hari. Said, oh, okay. Said, my name's Jayananda. At that time, Jayananda was covered in grease. He was fixing a car. Those days, the temple used to buy these old vehicles because they came at a cheaper price. And Jayananda Prabhu, with his expertise, he would fix these vehicles, and thus he would always be practically covered in grease. His clothes would be so torn. His preaching style was actually very simple, very direct. He would speak from his heart to the heart of the person. Once he was preaching to a couple of hippies from under a vehicle. It was like 11 o'clock at night and he was fixing the broken Sankirtan vehicle. He was telling them about the chanting, how glorious it is to chant this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, how it's life-changing, it alters lifetimes of karma. Then he started telling them about Srila Prabhupada with such sincerity. Even though all that was visible of him was his pair of legs sticking out from under the vehicle, the two hippies stood there transfixed by his message. During Ratha Yatra, he would organize crews of cynics, hippies, bloopers, uncooperative personalities and non-devotees that he would find off the street to help pull the carts. He would get them to work for 10 to 14 hours a day, always glorifying them. He would personally cook and feed them while they worked on the chariot. Once, a devotee visited Jayananda Prabhu in hospital, and Jayananda Prabhu told him, because he had so much faith in the process of Krishna consciousness, he didn't want to lose a single opportunity that presented himself to preach. So he told this visiting devotee that, why are you hanging out here? That means by Jayananda Prabhu's bed. He said, go to the waiting room and have kirtan and give a talk. So the devotee, he was brand new, but he had so much of faith in Jayananda Prabhu and he loved him so dearly that he found himself doing exactly as Jayananda Prabhu told him. So he went to the waiting room, he sat on the floor, he took a pair of kartals from his pocket and he started singing Hare Krishna. And all the people in the waiting room, they started to join in as he was encouraging them to. Then the devotee gave a little talk, much to his surprise, and the people, they really liked it. So another devotee, contemporary of Jayananda Prabhu also, Kalakanta Prabhu, he told a story of one time how Jayananda Prabhu and another devotee, they were struggling to load a very heavy refrigerator onto a truck. So two drunks were walking up the alley, and Jayananda Prabhu turned to the devotee that was helping him and he said, I'm going to give them a chance to do some devotional service. Imagine, they were actually zoned out in another world, drunk as you can imagine. And in his enthusiasm for devotional service, because it was usually contagious, there was this time that was no exception. Soon the drunks were right in there working with them to help carry the refrigerator, and then the job was done in no time, moving this heavy refrigerator. Then Jayananda Prabhu told them, now say Hare. And the drunks, they said Hare. He said, now say Krishna. The drunks repeated, Krishna. Now say Hare Krishna. And the drunks said Hare Krishna. So Jayananda said, Jai Hari Bol, thank you fellas, or glories to Srila Prabhupada. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita 7:11, actually there's a statement that the fundamental religious system in Kali Yuga is the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. So unless empowered by Krishna and his pure representatives, one cannot propagate the Sankirtan movement. So we can see that because of the genuine compassion in Jayananda, Krishna gave him a very unique ability to make people want to render devotional service directly or indirectly, irrespective of their background, irrespective of their current, what we would call unsattvic condition. Jayananda Prabhu was able to do this. Like we know, Prabhupada said, purity is the force, and sure enough, we can see by this example that Jayananda Prabhu's force was the depth of his own purity of acknowledging and believing in the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. Everything for Krishna. Jayananda Prabhu, in the CC, Madhya Leela 6.254, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu summarizes in a phrase, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, which means renunciation through wisdom that comes from practicing devotional service. So it's not the type of renunciation that Prabhupada mentions as Markat Vairagya, or the renunciation of a monkey. It's sort of like, artificial renunciation. What Jayananda Prabhu exhibited was something much deeper, as you will hear. See, Jayananda Prabhu, he had no possessions, almost no possessions, even during his years as a householder. Whatever he had, he used in Krishna's service, in the service of the temple. When he was gifted $5,000, he promptly donated that to Srila Prabhupada. In the introduction of the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada acknowledges this contribution, as we said before, and for many years he was almost single-handedly supporting the temple by driving his cab or his taxi for something like 12 to 14 hours a day. He paid all the bills. He was in his last days of, when he was in the last days of his life, he used the money that was given to him for the treatment of his leukemia to support the Ratha Yatra festival in LA. He was extremely careful with what he considered to be Srila Prabhupada's money. When he used to be on these incense run, selling incense, he would sleep on park benches in the bitter cold rather than spend money on booking a room in a motel. He used his considerable charm to get people of all different backgrounds to donate almost everything that was needed. One time, he was taking his temple president into a bar. And this bar had like a whole group of drunk people there. And Jayananda Prabhu, as soon as he entered, they all turned to him and they said, Jayananda, is this your temple president that you said you were going to introduce us to? And they gave a huge amount. They put all their money together and they gave the temple president a huge donation. Jayananda Prabhu was that expert. What he couldn't get for free, he made sure he received a very good value for what money he would eventually spend. Once, Jayananda Prabhu, he was prompted by all of the devotees to get new clothes, because his clothes were all utterly torn, messed with grease. After much coaxing, he conceded to go and get some from the Salvation Army shop, where one could pick up very cheap second-hand clothing. So he tried one set of clothing on because he was a tall person. It was not very easy to find clothes to fit his physique. So he found a set, he put it on, and then he thought he doesn't want to waste money on himself. Hence he put his old clothes, which were all full of holes, over the new clothes, the second-hand clothes that he acquired, and he proceeded to leave the store, and lo and behold, he was caught. He was caught, and then a policeman was called, and he had to appear in court. When he went to court, the judge, who was handling the case, Jayananda Prabhu told him, "Can I just say something?" And the judge conceded, and then he said, he started to tell the judge how he had given his whole life to selflessly serve for the benefit of others. And the reason that he took the clothes was because he couldn't bear to spend money on himself. He said that since whatever he gets, he uses for the welfare of others. He pronounced to the judge that, "I'm such an insignificant person. How can I even spend any money on myself when others are suffering?" The judge was so moved, and the policeman, he just volunteered to pay for the clothes, and the judge closed the case on the spot. So Jayananda Prabhu, he could have this effect. For some reason, Jayananda Prabhu, he was put in a clinic near San Diego in California for his cancer condition, leukemia. So one very nice devotee, Muktakesh, he told how he came to Jayananda Prabhu's room to bring something to him, and Muktakesh Prabhu was there in the room, and he casually was about to sit on the bed, but Jayananda stopped him before he did, asking him to please don't sit on the empty bed. So Muktakesh Prabhu was wondering why not, and when he turned, he saw that on the bed there was a small picture of Srila Prabhupada right at the head of the bed, propped up with pillows. Jayananda Prabhu explained how he had never seen such a nice bed as this since he became a devotee, and how he thought that it was more appropriate that his spiritual master Srila Prabhupada should enjoy that bed. Jayananda Prabhu gave this nice bed to his beloved Gurudev in love and devotion. He laid his own cancer-riddled, painful body, as you can well imagine, on the hard floor space right in front of that bed. In his final lesson in material detachment came when it was discovered that he was suffering from cancer of the lymph and the blood. Jayananda Prabhu, he continued as if nothing had changed. When his body had become frail and weak, he continued preaching, inspiring, organizing from his bed in the hospital. For him, the body was simply a means to render devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What an incredible mindset. Jayananda Prabhu, as you see in this lovely picture, he was very steady in his practice of Krishna consciousness. One devotee explained that Jayananda Prabhu, he was serving with him, and they entered the room at the end of the night to take rest. And then Jayananda Prabhu, the devotee, was so tired, he just climbed into the bed and was about to take rest, expecting that Jayananda Prabhu will do the same. Jayananda Prabhu picked up his bead bag and started and walked out of the room, saying that he had some rounds to finish. And the devotee said to him, you can finish those rounds tomorrow. Jayananda Prabhu said, I'm not so tired. And he, in order not to make the devotee feel bad, he left the room and continued to chant his japa. So he had that much faith in the process that Prabhupada gave him. He never ever sort of wavered in enthusiasm. One devotee, Chandan Acharya, he recollects that Jayananda was completely enamored and fixed in his Krishna consciousness. He would rise every morning in the Brahma Muhurta hours before 4, and he would do a little arati when he was away from the temple and sort of traveling Sankirtan. He would wake up at the same time, do a little arati, chant his rounds of japa, read Srila Prabhupada's books, and then he would cook prasad, offer it, and eat. And, he would go for his incense run, selling incense sticks, traveling away from the temple, and this was his daily schedule. He never deviated from this. He was completely happy as long as he was practicing Krishna consciousness. That's how fixed he was in faith, that even though no one's looking, this is the thing I'm doing. It's something I'm doing for me. So Jayananda Prabhu, he worshipped prasadam. As we heard, he was a big fellow, over 6 feet tall. Even when a little prasad fell on the floor, he would lick it up. He loved to cook, eat, offer, and distribute prasadam in a big way. One time he called Danavir Swami up, who was Danavir Prabhu. He told him to cook nice halava, nice peanut butter halava in those days. Jayananda Prabhu liked peanut butter halava. I must admit, I've never tasted it. I'm going to look for the recipe and try to experiment with it. So Jayananda Prabhu had Danavir Maharaj cook, at that time Danavir Prabhu, cook this halava and make a whole lot of simply wonderfuls. And he came and he picked him up, and they had a van full of devotees, and they proceeded towards a prison preaching program. And on their way, Jayananda Prabhu was smelling this halava. So he suggested, because he really loved the devotees, he loved seeing the devotees relish Krishna prasadam, and he loved their happy. He became very happy when the devotees were happy. So what he did was that he had the devotees pass some halava to each of the devotees. Then he passed the sweet balls out to the devotees, and eventually they realized they finished all the prasadam. And when they reached the prison, then the warden at the gate said to them, I hope you didn't bring any food. Food is not allowed. You're not allowed to bring in any food. So it was Krishna's arrangement, and Jayananda Prabhu was directed to actually make the devotees happy in such a way. Jayananda Prabhu, he would mention the word prasadam with so much love and devotion that immediately one would want to honor prasadam. He would personally make pies and take it with him when he went on boga runs or to secure permits for the Ratha Yatra. When he came across like new devotees, Jayananda Prabhu will sit the devotee down and feed them. Because Prabhupada said in the beginning, should get fed up until your neck. One new devotee, Jambavan, he recalls that when he was new, Jayananda Prabhu brought him a huge plate of prasadam. And he thought, when he saw this prasadam, I know my limits, I'll never be able to finish this plate. And Jayananda Prabhu said to him, eat, it's purifying. And with so much of love, Jayananda Prabhu was addressing Jambavan, the Jambavan who was also 6 foot tall. He found himself eating this prasadam, and when he finished that plate, Jayananda Prabhu brought him another plate of the same quantity of prasadam and just lovingly placed it in front of him. And Jambavan Prabhu found himself eating these 2 plates of prasadam that he never thought he would ever be able to even finish, even the one of it. So he would, sometimes late at night wake up devotees, and he would, give them prasadam. Wake them up from the bed, give them prasadam. So one time, at about 10 o'clock in the night, he called Jambavan Prabhu. He told him, open your mouth, I have a benediction for you. And he proceeded to give him a samosa. Sometimes he would wake him up and he would give him peanut butter halava. So this was like incredible. It simply say, here's a benediction, I have a benediction for you. The devotee who wrote one of the books, which is like I think his name is Vishok Prabhu or something with V. That devotee, he mentions in his book about how one time Jayananda Prabhu gave him a mango. He was really sick, and Jayananda Prabhu came into the room and said to him, "We really miss your association." And he expressed so much of love that this devotee said Jayananda Prabhu was like the best medicine anyone could come across if they were sick. So the one time he told this devotee who wrote that biography of him, he said, "You know, I have a special gift for you. Go up to the room. It's on the table. It's specially for you. Don't show it to anybody." So when the devotee went up, he saw this beautiful ripened mango, such a beautiful mango. And he didn't want to disobey Jayananda Prabhu, so he started eating the mango. But tastier or sweeter than the mango was the sweetness in the manner in which Jayananda Prabhu presented him with this gift of a mango, making him feel so special. So he said the sweetness of that is like an eternal mango in his entire life. So another example of his attachment was his attachment for the holy name. He would oftentimes take the whole temple out on Harinam. Jayananda Prabhu was always seen chanting, dancing in kirtan, enthusiastically, even in the temple, out on the street. One day, after working hard for like 10 hours straight, when all the other devotees were so looking forward to coming home, taking some rest at the temple, Jayananda Prabhu enthusiastically bounced into the temple room for kirtan. He said, it's nearly 7 o'clock. So he went into the shower, took a quick shower, dressed up in fresh clothes, and went down to the temple for 7 o'clock arati. His japa was so intense, so focused, the devotees say, and that he strove to... They said that when Jayananda Prabhu chanted his japa, it was so intense, so focused, as if he strove to personally associate with each and every syllable of the mantra, fully understanding that Krishna is present in every syllable. He was always looking for ways to preach to new people. Once, while making a garden for Srila Prabhupada in the LA temple, which Prabhupada really liked, Jayananda Prabhu told Karandar Prabhu, "You know, things won't always go smoothly in Krishna consciousness. You have to keep chanting. Srila Prabhupada is given a simple process. We just have to have faith in the chanting of the holy name and honor Krishna Prasadam. He said many things may come and go. Just have faith in the name." And even in his last days, he would preach from his wheelchair to people to have faith in the holy name. In the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami, he mentions that the process of sadhana bhakti, it first begins with shraddha or faith. Then this faith, it blossoms, and it blossoms into a desire for devotee association, or what Rupa Goswami says is sadhu sangha. And then it manifests as bhajana kriya or devotional service. So similarly, Jayananda Prabhu, after receiving the association of Srila Prabhupada and the other devotees at the temple, he began to execute devotional service, and per instructions he received from his spiritual master, he executed his sadhana so sincerely, became purified of material impediments. And Rupa Goswami mentions that as anartana vritti. And he began to manifest the all-attractive qualities of a pure devotee, of one who has nishta, ashakti, bhava and prem. All of these qualities actually started to blossom in Jayananda Prabhu from the foundation of his steadfast faith in his devotional practices. Jayananda Prabhu was more humble than a blade of grass. His humility was certainly the most prominent quality in his character. He treated everyone around him as his superior, even new devotees. Although his service was glorious, he never ever wanted any glory. He avoided praise like a plague. The devotees who were around him, they knew. They got to know that if they wanted to keep Jayananda Prabhu's association, they better not start praising him. His humility was very natural, and he always found something or the other than himself that was praiseworthy. Even though he was a senior devotee, older than most of the people around him, and eminently qualified, he was happy to simply serve in the most menial way. Once, a new boy at the temple wanted to do some service, and the temple president asked him to take out the trash. The weekly trash run, or garbage run as we would say here in South Africa, was done by Jayananda Prabhu, who cheerfully took the little help from the boy when he offered. Later that boy became a devotee, and he remembered thinking, if the garbage man in this temple can be so blissful, just imagine what the rest of the devotees are like. So Jayananda Prabhu was like the poster boy for Srila Prabhupada's process of devotional service. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his 3rd verse of the Shishashtakam, you will know, he lays down the qualifications for offenseless chanting. And what does he say? He says that one can chant the holy name of the Lord. How? In a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. And Jayananda Prabhu, he exemplified this verse. He was so humble that just being in his association would make one feel ashamed of one's own pride. He was very special. No one paid any special attention to him, and that was just the way Jayananda Prabhu liked things to be. His attitude was das anudas, that he was always he was expert at everything. He was expert at cooking, preaching, deity worship, public relations, sankirtan, selling incense. He was also very good at selling Back to Godhead magazines. He was expert at construction and anything that it took to spread Krishna consciousness. He was tireless. He was first to rise in the morning and last to sleep at night. That was Jayananda Prabhu. He was always running out to get flowers, washing dishes, cleaning the kitchen, or sometimes, almost every opportunity he had, he would take out the garbage. Whatever service he was given, he would make sure that it was done no matter how busy he was or how much personal hardships he had to endure for it. No matter how hard he was working, he could never stop for a nap during the day. He seemed inexhaustible. Even though he was older than all of the younger devotees there, he had more energy than many of them put together. Many times, when Jayananda Prabhu went to Berkeley to distribute leftover prasadam, the first thing he would do would be to organize a crew to clean the kitchen. He himself would work twice as hard as anybody else. He would transfer the prasad, load it into the van, drive to Berkeley, organize the distribution, have kirtan while all of this was going on. Many years later, he readily accepted the position of a driver for the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party, working side by side with the brahmacharis who were half his age. In spite of him being advanced in position, seniority, he never asked for anything special and, so readily accepted menial position. Actually, he was the temple president at the time. So he wrote to Srila Prabhupada and asked if he could resign as temple president and become the driver for the devotees, the Sankirtan devotees, and Prabhupada consented. In the Vishnu Purana, Krishna, he tells Arjuna that one who claims to be my devotee is not actually my devotee, but one who claims to be the devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. And Jayananda Prabhu completely manifested this quality. He was always striving to be this Das Anudas, the servant of the servant, but there was no artificial humility in him. Material humility is relative. It is predictated on the qualifications of the recipients. But Jayananda Prabhu, he had spiritual humility. It was absolute, without any consideration of the status of the qualities of the recipient. He served everyone and expected no one to serve him. Even, if a person was a non-devotee, a drunk, Jayananda Prabhu, he willingly served the person. So, Jayananda Prabhu, as I said earlier on, he embodied the qualities of a Vaishnav quite fully. And one of the outstanding qualities, amidst many outstanding qualities in Jayananda Prabhu, was his freedom from fault finding. Perhaps it was one of the most defining characteristics of Jayananda Prabhu that he would never ever criticize anyone. Even if a devotee did something that warranted criticism, he would usually not say anything, or else make a mistake appear as something perfectly natural. He never spoke harsh words or chastised anybody. Sometimes devotees would come to him with expansive ideas of how to spread Krishna consciousness, and Jayananda Prabhu, he would encourage these ideas, however extraordinary it may have seemed. And because of this, many devotees, if they had anything to say, Jayananda Prabhu was the perfect listener. But let it be said that at the same time, Jayananda Prabhu was not a fool. He could always pick the right man for the job. Everyone knew that if you wanted to be in Jayananda Prabhu's cherished association, you never criticize others, or Jayananda Prabhu will simply walk away. Like it said, in the Nectar of Instruction, text 5, Srila Rupa Goswami says that one should associate with and faithfully serve that pure devotee who is advanced in undeviated devotional service, whose heart is completely devoid of the propensity to criticize others. Jayananda Prabhu could not even bear to hear the criticism of any other devotee. If such a thing were happening, he would leave the room. These are like characteristics of the uppermost class of a devotee, an Uttam Adhikari, who has reached the highest level of spiritual perfection. This is the behavior. And Jayananda Prabhu, he exhibited this. So regarding Ratha Yatra, as we said before, he was known as Mr. Ratha Yatra, or he was known as the King of Ratha Yatra. Jayananda Prabhu was the backbone of the Bay Area Ratha Yatra for several years. Behind the scenes, he would do everything in preparation for this festival. He would go begging for the food. He would beg for the flowers, the funds, buy materials, build the carts. Sometimes at night, he would drive around the city during the day, scouting for beams of wood, iron, etc. that he could use for the building of the Ratha Yatra chariot. And in the midst of the night, he would take some devotees and go pick up these things. He would come, and then he would build a chariot for Lord Jagannath with all of this. He would arrange for permits. Like I said, some cities, they needed like 11 permits just to have the chariot parade. Jayananda Prabhu would make sure that he would melt the hearts of these city officials, giving them prasadam, organize the cooking and the serving of the prasadam. Although things always didn't really go as planned sometimes, he would consistently succeed in fulfilling all the plans every year, despite all of the troubles, trials, tribulations that would come his way. After the festival, Jayananda Prabhu, he would do an amazing thing. He would cook cakes and pies by himself for each and every person who somehow helped in the festival. Because of his efforts, the Bay Area devotees up to this day enjoy an amazing harmonious relationship with the city officials, because Jayananda Prabhu set such a trend in winning the hearts of all of these somewhat cynical, iron-hearted kind of people. In his last days, Jayananda Prabhu was busy organizing Rath Yatra from the hospital bed. He would talk to people on the phone, send his associates to meet various people, and things began to miraculously materialize, even though he wasn't physically doing it. Every moment of his life was preciously used in the service of Krishna. He lived his life with purpose. Jayananda Prabhu is said to have some mystic opulence. Many of his contemporaries have noted this. And what was that mystic opulence? It is said that in pure devotional service brings about mystic opulence. In our scriptures we read that. The devotees never, though the devotees never seek them out, once they are there, they are used for Krishna service. So Jayananda Prabhu, apparently, he could function in a mystical way with very little or no sleep when he was working on the chariots. Towards the last few days of Rath Yatra, he would sleep less than 3 hours a day. Yet he was the most energetic and enlivened member of the crew. His propensity to consume prasadam was another outstanding opulence of his mysticism. He could consume buckets of halava, plates of samosas and potatoes without any side effects. When he was in his last days, in hospital, they put him on an intravenous diet. And he would oftentimes at that time ask devotees to sneak in huge amounts of samosas and cheese and potatoes, which he would happily consume, and he would not have any apparent distress. He would sometimes sleep in the Bhagavatam class. Another amazing thing about him. He would be so tired that he would sleep in the Bhagavatam class, and sometimes even in Prabhupada's presence. And Prabhupada would say, leave him, let him sleep, he has worked very hard. So another mystic opulence is that he could fall asleep in the Bhagavatam class since he was so tired. Yet later, he could perfectly quote from the class and give deep discussion on its contents. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, Krishna declares that one who is engaged in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. In the Narada Prancharatra, it's also said, devotional service of the Lord is likened to a queen attended by maid servants in the form of material opulences, liberation and mysticism. So Jayananda Prabhu, he never had any hankering for these, but when they came, he simply used them in Krishna's service. He never behaved in this way for glory, but simply for the service of Krishna. That's quite an amazing person. Srila Prabhupada is eternal master. So let's explore a little about his relationship with Srila Prabhupada. Jayananda Prabhu had complete faith in Srila Prabhupada. He perfected his devotion by making the instructions of Srila Prabhupada the very core of his life. When the Back to Godhead asked him in an interview, the year he passed away, if Srila Prabhupada had given him any direct instructions on Ratha Yatra or about Ratha Yatra, he said no. Prabhupada told him, the only thing Prabhupada told him, make everything nice and strong. So he was advanced enough to realize that real association with one's spiritual master was through following instructions. Unlike most of the other devotees who would go out of the way to get some personal association of Srila Prabhupada, Jayananda Prabhu was content to work in the background, carrying out Prabhupada's instructions, fulfilling Prabhupada's desire. He exemplified the superiority of association Vani over Vapu. That means following the instructions of the spiritual master as more important than personal association. It was quite apparent how fond Srila Prabhupada himself was of Jayananda Prabhu. Prabhupada, he would, in San Francisco in 1968, one time during an initiation lecture, Prabhupada, he looked at Jayananda Prabhu dancing in the kirtan, and chuckling he said, "Jayananda looks like Lord Chaitanya." Yes, he was tall, stout and strong, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That was Prabhupada's words. He would constantly ask for Jayananda Prabhu. Prabhupada would, when Jayananda Prabhu wasn't around, there were so many other devotees around, Prabhupada would call for him, would ask for him. He would, and whenever he came to the temple, Jayananda Prabhu would be, if he was busy, Prabhupada would ask the devotees, "Where's Jayananda Prabhu?" And sometimes he would make repeated requests for them to go and call him. And the devotees, when they would finally locate him in some distant place, engaged in some service, Jayananda Prabhu would refuse to go. He's saying, "No, I can't go to see him. I'm too dirty. I'm too fallen." And Prabhupada, he recognized that that Jayananda Prabhu's heart was actually pure, actually so clean in imbibing and executing the love of Krishna in such a magnanimous and outstanding manner. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the Madhya Leela, he says that among all living entities wandering through the universe, one who is most fortunate comes in contact with the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus gets an opportunity to execute devotional service. Jayananda Prabhu, he was such a person who came in contact with the pure bona fide representative of the Lord in Srila Prabhupada, and under his guidance he was able to perfect his entire life in perfection of devotional service. So as I mentioned earlier, Jayananda Prabhu, prior to meeting Srila Prabhupada, he was mighty depressed about life, and he was actually suicidal. So when Prabhupada published the Krishna book, and the devotees managed to get copies of them, Jayananda Prabhu, he had a personal copy, and he made some notes in the jacket of the Krishna book. And in point form, he listed, and I just want to quote what he listed in the inside cover of this Krishna book. He said, "As you begin to apply the book's clearly described principles in your life, you will quickly experience a new realm of mental poise, and experience an inner happiness even in the midst of the most trying circumstances. You will worry less, enjoy more. Your power of concentration, memory, understanding, and creativity will increase. You will work more energetically, more confidently, with efficiency, and as well as relate better to other people. You will succeed more easily in whatever you are doing. At night, you will fall asleep immediately, and in the morning, you will awaken thoroughly refreshed, with even less hours of sleep than you would normally need. Consequently, you will understand the real purpose of your life and your unique role in this creation." That was like his amazing realization that helped him overcome his depression. For one, in the Bhagavatam, Krishna explains that for one who worships him, giving up all his activities, being devoted to Krishna without any deviation, engaged in devotional service, always meditating on him, Krishna, who has fixed his mind upon him, Krishna. For him, Krishna is the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Actually, Krishna explains that the entire material creation, by his mercy, even though it appears to be a huge ocean, is reduced to that water that is contained in the hoofprint of a calf. That means all the difficulties that seem so mighty, so insurmountable in the material world, when one surrenders to Krishna, it is easily to overcome, as easy as it is to cross over the puddle contained in the hoofprint of a calf. So, devotional service has a type of ripple effect. This ripple effect is quite incredible, that when one person in the family becomes Krishna conscious, many things happen mysteriously in the lives of anyone who had been connected to that person. Srila Prabhupada said, the parents of my disciples will realize their good fortune at the time of their passing away. So I'd like to share with you an incredible story of Jayananda Prabhu's mother. Jayananda Prabhu's mother was she was ill, and towards the end of her life put in a 10-bed facility hospice. So at that time, by Krishna's arrangement, a devotee was working in that hospice, and the devotee's main service was to bathe all of these patients in the hospice. So the devotee thought that many people here, they are expressing their faith, their spirituality by wearing crosses, doves, silk threads, pentacles, other items. So why not I wear my tilak? So the devotee decided to wear tilak to work. So the devotee put on the tilak and went to work, and on Monday, 6th August 2007, in that hospice, she got one patient by the name of Jane Kaur, who had been with them for almost a week. So she bathed the person, singing the Maha Mantra. And around 8 a.m. on August 6th, she entered the devotee's, that lady's room, Jane's room, and she saw that she was almost leaving a body. She was unresponsive, her body was very limp. So she sang the Maha Mantra to this lady a few times. And when she came out of the room, the lady, Jane, her grandson, approached this devotee and said, "Thank you for taking care of my grandmother." And then he looked at the forehead, and he pointed to his own forehead, and he asked, "Are you a Hare Krishna?" And when she said, "Yes, I'm a Hare Krishna," he said, "Well, then you may be knowing of my uncle Jayananda." So the devotee said, "You mean the Jayananda?" He said, "Yes." And he went on to tell the devotee how his uncle used to build these Ratha Yatra carts. And he went and he informed his mother, who was actually Jayananda Prabhu's sister. So Jayananda Prabhu's sister, her name, as I mentioned before, Gaynell, she came and she started to speak to this devotee, and she said, she was so happy that a Krishna devotee was caring for her mother in this very vulnerable state that her mother was in. She said that, and then the whole family, they started to express that it meant so much to them. And Gaynell, she kept saying that she couldn't believe that this devotee was a Hare Krishna, because she said she told her mother, and she wasn't sure that her mother could hear. She was telling Jane, who was now leaving her body, Hare Krishna is here. Hare Krishna is taking care of you. And she said she kind of got an impression that the mother could understand that, yes, the Hare Krishna was here. And later on, this devotee, she explained that Gaynell told her that she was praying to Jayananda Prabhu to please send some help for her, to help her mother in this condition, because she knew that her brother had attained such a high state of spiritual perfection. So it's a ripple effect. And then the Jayananda Prabhu's niece started to say to this devotee how she remembered Jayananda Prabhu always dressed in robes, and how he was cooking these fabulous vegetarian feasts and feeding them. And then this devotee proceeded to tell this Jayananda Prabhu's family that, nowadays all over the world we have the Ratha Yatra festival. And the Gaynell started to say, yes, actually one of Jayananda Prabhu's friends called them and told her that he saw in Durban, South Africa, the Ratha Yatra chariot festival was being held, and it was his first encounter with such a pompous festival on the street, the Ratha Yatra festival. First time in his life, this American tourist saw the Ratha Yatra chariot at Durban's Snell Parade. He walked up to have a look at the chariot at close range, and lo and behold, he saw the photograph of Jayananda Prabhu on the chariot. And he asked one of the devotees, "Who is that?" And the devotee said, "Jayananda." So they said, "Pardon?" So then somehow by Krishna's arrangement, a senior devotee within earshot started to explain to him, actually his name was Jim Kaur, because he recognized the man's American accent. So he said, yes, his name was Jim Kaur. So the man said, "I actually know him. I was in school with him." It turned out that this man was Jayananda Prabhu's friend from school, who now that they had finished school, used to arrange all of the class reunions. So he was so happy that he was reunited with the late Jayananda Prabhu, his friend. He immediately, sought out Jayananda Prabhu's sister's contact details, and he called her up and he said, "You know what? Here in Durban, South Africa, can you believe there's this majestic chariot, and Jayananda and Jim's picture is there, and they say that he's a modern day saint, and they say that all over the world, in almost every country, this festival is held, and on every chariot his picture is hung." So the family, they were like so touched by this, and they told this devotee this in the hospice. And like I said, this Krishna consciousness, it has a ripple effect. So Jayananda Prabhu, in his final days, he was in the wheelchair. He discharged himself from hospital forcibly when the drugs were being too heavy and were affecting his consciousness, and his preaching in the hospital became restricted by the officials there. He saw no reason to stay there anymore, because life was meant for preaching as far as he was concerned. So Jayananda Prabhu, as you see in this picture, he was seated in the wheelchair, and it was his birthday. Few days before his passing, on April 27th is Jayananda Prabhu's birthday. So he passed away on May 1st, but on April 27th is his birthday. So that year, on April 27th, a devotee called Viharani, she made wonderful cakes for Jayananda Prabhu's birthday. Actually, there were 3 cakes, and they all resembled the different colors of the chariots. At that time, being wheelchair bound, he immediately, even though he was in the wheelchair, he felt the enthusiasm to talk, and he started to preach. He even wanted to stand up and speak even though his voice was so weak, Jayananda Prabhu's drive, his life was that every breath belonged to Krishna. Once he expressed the desire that he wanted to leave this world before Srila Prabhupada did. And while preparing for the New York Ratha Yatra in 1976, Jayananda Prabhu, he found very painful lumps growing on his body. A god brother who was quite worried that these lumps may be cancerous, told Jayananda that maybe, he should do something about it. But Jayananda Prabhu made him promise not to tell Prabhupada until after the festival. His main concern was the Ratha Yatra should be a success. Everything else, including his health, which was in such a crucial state, he considered to be secondary. The New York Ratha Yatra was indeed a great success. Rolled down Fifth Avenue, 3 chariots, delighted thousands of people. Prabhupada was ecstatic. He called it a great success, and Prabhupada actually thanked Jayananda Prabhu for his service. The lumps on Jayananda Prabhu's body turned out to be cancerous. He was diagnosed with leukemia, which gradually reduced his body to simply a shell. Accepting that he would die soon, Jayananda Prabhu continued to express deep gratitude towards Prabhupada. His friends were shocked and saddened to see how his body was sort of depleting right in front of their very eyes. But Jayananda Prabhu, he was busy, performing devotional service, not giving much concern, and when he did agree to medical treatment, he used his time in hospital, as I said, to preach to the nurses, the doctors, the patients about Krishna consciousness. At one point he left the hospital and he went back to the Devotees Association, like I said just now, when his preaching became restricted. And in his final months, having helped organize the last LA festival, raising money, guiding the devotees, one day he asked the devotees to take him for a walk on Venice Beach, and he went there. While the devotee took him to Venice Beach, he, as if visualizing an upcoming festival, he exclaimed, "What a wonderful Ratha Yatra!" So Jayananda Prabhu was a very unique personality. He left his body in full glory in the auspicious time of Brahma Muhurta on May 1st, 1977, the same year Srila Prabhupada left his body. Prabhupada also left in November 1977. Jayananda Prabhu, at the age of 38 only, left his body. And how? It was Mangal Arati time. He was listening to a tape of his beloved spiritual master chanting in his ear, and the devotees were chanting in his other ear. And amazingly, a devotee at that time in the temple picked up a Mahagalan from Lord Jagannath. Some devotees say the garland fell from Lord Jagannath's neck, and this devotee brought it. He put it around Jayananda Prabhu's head, cradling this garland from Lord Jagannath around his neck, resting on his chest. Srila Prabhupada chanting in his one ear, devotees chanting on the other ear. At the auspicious Brahma Muhurta hour, Mangal Arati time, Jayananda Prabhu breathed his last. Srila Prabhupada remarked that Jayananda's death is glorious, and he instructed all the devotees from around the world to commemorate this auspicious disappearance day, and as we do for other great Vaishnav saints in our Gaudiya Vaishnav Sampradaya. He also instructed that Jayananda's picture be placed on the Ratha Yatra chariots, and to this day, all over the world, this happens. And in conclusion, I think I'll end there. I didn't realize the time had passed so much. Actually, Jayananda Prabhu from the Arya team, he told me I have a minimum of 20 minutes to speak, and then I can go on until COVID-19 finishes. However, I just looked at the clock now. I'm sorry it took so long. But in conclusion, I would like to say that as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur so eloquently said, he reasons ill who says that Vaishnavas die. When thou art living still in sound, the Vaishnav dies to live, and in living tries to spread the holy name around. So Jayananda Prabhu's memorial is in Rajpur at the Jagannath Mandir in Mayapur Dham, where he's honored by all those who visit him. If you ever go to Mayapur after this pandemic ends, please visit this place and offer your respects to his memorial there. Shriman Jayananda Thakur ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.